Cool.
Sounds good.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited for today's conversation. The guest, I'll just share with you, I've been looking forward to picking your brain since I met you, however many weeks ago that was, because I'm fascinated with your field of work and your expertise. I also just like you as a person.
Thanks.
So I'm excited to pick your brain. But for everybody listening, everybody watching, Dr. Nancy Utter, you're a naturopathic doctor. You're also a small business owner, and you own Durango Natural Medicine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Gosh,
yes.
I had all the notes written down and I stumbled on them.
But it's okay.
Super excited to pick your brain because as I told you, when we had met a couple weeks ago, I've been on a bit of I'm going to call it a health journey the last few years, but it's really expedited in the last probably 18 months, 2 years or so. I was sharing with you how I, cut out alcohol and it felt a huge improvement there. And anyway, it's just fun because the concept of my podcast is Chasing Greatness. And it's this idea of holistic greatness, like how we can be the best versions of ourselves. And your field of expertise fits into it so perfectly. Yay. So thank you so much for being here and for giving me some of your time. I just can't tell you how excited I am to dive in a little bit.
Well, thanks. Me too. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. And this is one of my biggest passions. And so I love talking about it. And I love answering questions. And I love doing this without something scripted because I think it goes in, where it's supposed to go, and it's super fun. So
and it's going to be especially fun because I'm on a little bit of a selfish endeavor today. Like I get to actually sit and learn from an expert, and so anyway, it's going to be great.
Fun.
But I'd love to hear a little bit of your background and I mean honestly, why naturopathic medicine? What set you down this path to begin with? I know I was reading in your bio, but obviously you've got your doctorate and all of that, but you've put a whole lot of time and energy into studying it.
Oh yeah.
So walk me through that. What was the desire to study natural medicine to begin with?
Well, it goes way back. I wanted to do something meaningful. I love the natural world. I grew up in LA. But in the suburbs, but my parents had grown my dad grew up in the eastern side of the Sierra. So we were in the mountains out all the time. And they were fishermen. And so that was very slow for a child. So I'd go wandering off by myself and tickle the trout under the banks and just be out. And that gave me something so much, it was like, oh, I love this. I love this. I'd cry when they took me out of the mountains.
Right.
Because I was like, I don't want to go back. So I had this, and they both fostered that in me because they both had it too. And so I had this love of the natural world. Deep thing. It's a spiritual aspect for me for sure. So I decided when I grew up, I wanted to do something with that. And my undergraduate degree was from Humboldt State in land use planning and resource management.
Oh, interesting.
Because of thinking, the journey is so fun to look back on, but thinking, oh, that's the way I can do good stuff, I can make good things happen, all of that. And I did that for a while. And then so how did that go? I worked for La Plata County as a land use planner. That's how I came here for 2 years of hell. It was really, really hard because you couldn't make anybody happy.
Right.
And so then I left there and I became a consultant on my own, an independent consultant for people trying to get through the land use process, because it was so hard.
Yeah.
And it was great because I worked 20 hours a week, made a lot of money, and I got to play. So I kayaked and I biked and I skied to my heart's content, which I hadn't gotten to do because I was either in school or working until then.
Yeah.
And as I got more and more dissatisfied with what I was doing, just going, wow, it's really hard to make positive changes for the environment in the development community because people want to make money, which I totally get. And so as I was biking and kayaking and skiing, I started dreaming, which was not intentional. It just happened. The space opened up. I was like, wow, how do I move forward? What do I want? And I don't know. I think people are called to things. And I had this idea, oh, I want to be a doctor. I was like, oh, I don't want to do conventional medicine, but I had no idea about naturopathic medicine. And so I was like, oh no, I'm going to keep biking and skiing and working a little bit. And finally, I came around to it like, I need to move on. And it's going to mean, like, if I want to do this, I have to go back to school. I'm going to have to be poor again. I'm going to have to leave Durango. And so finally, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I went back to school at the fort to redo a lot of my sciences because they were so old. I went back to school at 35 to be a doctor.
Wow.
So
that in and of itself is so cool, by the way.
It's like I look back now and go, whoa.
Yeah.
But it was just the timing was right for all of it, and everything happened. And I set this goal for myself. I'm like, okay, if I like organic chemistry, not just pass it, but if I'm interested in it and I like it, I then can go back to school, I think, and do this. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
It's so funny because you talk about how, like, you know, being called to things or whatever. And, you know, when there's the benefit of hindsight and looking back on those aspects of your life that, you know, there was, I'm going to call it joy, but, you know, the time in the mountains and, you know, fishing with the family and things like that. It's interesting. I made a post the other day on my story. My brother-in-law was in town hunting actually last week, and I had taken him out hunting, and there was one morning I decided I'm going to bring my sons with me too, which it was a big deal to bring my sons on an elk hunt. They go on deer hunting all the time, but to take them elk hunting was, you know, because they're young, they're 6 and 4.
Oh yeah, they're little.
And we had an amazing time. We almost got one. It was just so fun. And I was just coming back feeling so filled up, and I was like, man, this might be the happiest year I've ever had ever. And I was trying to think about why. You know, like, you know, and there's been a whole lot of, I mean, the list is very long.
Right.
But one of the biggest ones is that I've spent a whole lot more time in the mountains.
Yeah.
I've exercised more. I've spent time with people that I love more, and I've spent more time in the mountains. Like, you know, significantly more. Like getting back to the roots of the things that have made me happy.
Right.
Which speaks to why I'm so excited to learn from you and pick your brain, because I've got this almost like, I don't know, I have a strong desire to spread happiness and well-being and fulfillment and, you know, all of this stuff to people.
Beautiful.
And I think that there's a potential maybe for misinformation out there, or, you know, things that we think are going to contribute to health and wellness and these things like that, that sometimes don't. And, you know, it's funny because when you get to experience the natural sides of things, it feels natural. And I wonder sometimes if we don't realize, you know, how far our lifestyles have evolved as humans and kind of gotten us away from
beyond that,
the way we're supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah. What's your take on that? Because I would imagine that, you know, your field of study, a lot of it are things that humans have been doing forever, or could have been doing, you know, forever. Am I wrong in that?
No, that's a huge conversation. I'll try to boil it down to something doable. So one of my perspectives has always been, probably because of my own experience in nature so much, you know, wild places fill me up. Wild places, I get clarity, I get clear, the quiet helps so much. So when I look at people who are coming to me to regain their health, because a lot of the times I get the worst of the worst. These people have been everywhere and they're not better, and they're coming to me. I used to call myself the end of the road doctor.
You're the last option.
I try not to say that anymore. Yeah.
We're going to make you the first option. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. I'd love that. You know, that's the goal. But I do believe it's like people don't know, like we were talking earlier, where their food comes from. And so they don't understand what's in it. You know, the things like animal products especially, you know, they're full of bad things for us. If they're not organic, they're full of stuff that's designed not to make us healthy, but to make money off the animals in the product. And I think that, and I've always thought that the farther we get away from the natural world, the more lost we get, and the more chances that there's more chance that we get unhealthy and out of balance. And I know we're all different, and I know we all have different needs, but to me, that nature is in our DNA, and it is something that we can come back to, and we can come back to, and we can learn, people who haven't been out. I mean, I have a lot of patients who I'm like, go take a hike, and they're scared. They're like, oh, but there's bears out there. Oh, and I'm like, well, go on the bike path, which I saw a fox on the other day. So it's like, oh.
I actually have a buddy that ran into a bear on the bike path at one point.
Right. It's not, what am I saying?
But we're in Durango, so jokes aside, but a safe alternative.
Yeah, go get out, And I think that if I look at our culture, which is the main culture that I know, I do believe that separation from the natural world hurts us. I don't feel, worried or hesitant to say that at all.
Yeah.
And as we get more and more technologically advanced, and as that separation becomes bigger and bigger, I think we're going to see more and more trouble.
Yeah.
In the health world, But my definition of health is mind, body, spirit. It's not just physical health. It's like, because of the connection with, I can't separate those things. When I'm working with someone, I'm like, well, how's this part and how's this part? Because, you think about the way that the nervous system guides digestion, healing, everything. If the nervous system is in a state of fight or flight as a default, nothing else works very well, except fight or flight.
Right.
That's it.
Right. I had Dr. Chris Wood on a while back, chiropractor here in town, and learned all about the nervous system. It was so fascinating. But he taught me that it's basically three things, and it's our thoughts, our traumas, and our toxins. And being able to clear out the nervous system for that, and the fact that that thoughts were included in his in the trifecta of the nervous system. I loved. I have been running a lot lately, mostly for my mental health more than my physical health, and sharing that idea that our minds and our bodies, you can't work on one without working on the other, because they're that connected. Like if we're working on one of them, the other is benefiting while we're at it. Tell me more about that from your perspective, the mind, body, spirit relationship, and how it all works together.
Well, that's another, again, huge conversation. But I think that, to me, they're inextricably connected. And they're not even, I wouldn't even say connected, they're so inherently a part of each, together. So for me, again, the way I think is always in that way. And I feel like and I don't do this, but if I were to just address the physical issues in someone, most of the time I'd be missing the mark. And sometimes it's simple. I rarely get those people that have simple issues sometimes, and it's like, oh, great, this is an easy thing. But most of the time there's a lot of other stuff involved. And the first thing that comes to mind is stress. As you were saying, mental health and trying to improve that, there's a lot of pieces to it. Because our brains really want to control everything. And so they will ruminate and ruminate and ruminate, and the worry, and then the fight or flight, and then the way it affects everything else. And so the spirit too, if somebody's, having trouble with figuring out what they want to do with their lives, or if they're in an abusive relationship, or they have trauma, trauma is huge. And trauma often is the thing, I think, that really holds people back, because it's they don't even know.
Right.
They don't even know. And I have those conversations with my patients about, well, what was your childhood like? How was it? And then when they tell me, and I see that trauma, which is inevitably there in one way or another. We
all have traumas.
It's part of life, So it's not oh, that's weird. It's oh, no, I'm wondering how that affects you. And it's fun to point to trauma, with digestion. Trauma, stress, a trauma response that is unmitigated, that hasn't been, and I don't, sometimes you can't heal trauma, but you can put it a little bit less in charge of everything.
Love that.
And so trauma will often guide digestive issues. And you see that in people with like IBS. It often is a current stressor, but it also can often be their nervous systems are habituated into moving into that fight or flight mode whenever they're threatened in the least bit.
Right.
And then digestion shuts down. And if we were running from a bear or fighting the mountain lion, the saber-toothed tiger, we wouldn't be eating. We would be doing that, and then we'd be done. If we survived, we'd go and rest and recuperate. We don't do that now.
Right. Yeah, and that's a fascinating, that kind of touches back on, and I didn't intend to, make that the theme of the conversation, but the drastic evolution that has happened. And honestly,
yeah.
It's been expedited, I think, in the last few years with technology.
Yeah.
So we're still these human beings that are wired to survive and have fight or flight or whatever.
Right.
And now there's this whole new inundation of stressors and stimulus and things like that.
Yeah.
I read a study a while back, and I'm going to butcher the specifics of it, but the gist of it was they basically took two groups of people and tested them for their perception of stress. And the group that had a healthy perception of stress had some percentage decrease in all-cause mortality, just in how they perceived stress. They didn't have lesser levels of stress, but they perceived it in a different way. I'm curious your take on kind of the modern world and our stress systems. One would just be your perspective on it, but then the follow-up would be some I'll call it tips or tricks, advice from you on how people can manage stress, in a modern environment.
Yeah, so I do think that you're right on with what you said about the last few years, the advent of social media, and I'm not against it, but I think we have to control it for ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's the one way to manage stress is to be very aware of what we're doing, because that scrolling, doom scrolling, is that what it's referred to? It triggers dopamine release in the brain, which feels great. That's why people are addicted to everything they're addicted to. So it's like catching that and managing that, I think, is really important. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, to me, that stressor is almost intangible. Like, there's nothing there,
It's almost like a fabricated stress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It isn't. I mean, it's real to people. If they read something then and it affects them or they're triggered by it, it's very real to them. But we have control over it, kind of, sort of.
Right.
So I do think that the modern world is creating a lot of, number one, different stressors. So if you go back to that idea that as cave people, we could fight or flight from our stressors. Not everything. Like if there was a famine, if there was something else that was a threat to us that we couldn't fight or flight from, that was a different story. But our main stressors were short, not sweet, but they were short. And they were done.
Right.
And we either made it or we didn't. And then we had time to recover, to get ready for the next time. Because we were prey at that point, long time ago. So that's a very different kind of process than what happens to us today. If I'm looking at media, any kind of media, and I read something that triggers me, either because I have an old trauma with something that's related to that, or I just get scared, or I get angry, or I get whatever, it triggers my nervous system. And depending on how that makes sense about the perception of stress, like that makes sense in terms of if I don't perceive the stress as being like this thing I can't deal with,
right,
then I can handle it maybe. And my nervous system is always looking for clues like how safe is it? Every situation. But if there's this thing I call hypervigilance in the nervous system. And if you've had a lot of trauma, your nervous system is looking for the next shoe to drop. It's looking for the saber-toothed tiger. And so if you have a little stressor, it triggers it. I don't know if that's making sense, but I do think that our stress levels, honestly, it's kind of, besides diet and lifestyle habits, it is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that we can change it. So, I had a patient the other day say, well, so I said, well, what's your stress like? And he's like, oh man, it's off the charts. It has been for a long time. I can feel it. I'm anxious. I feel bad. And I said, okay, well, what do you think about working on that? And he's like, oh, I meditate and what did he say? I meditate and I, do this and I do that. And I'm like, those are great things. That's beautiful. And there's this whole world of natural medicines that help the nervous system go, I'm okay, in spite of the stressor.
Beyond lifestyle and diet?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, so one of the categories I go to first is herbal medicines. And when you're looking at that, you're talking about those plants. Many of them have been around as long as there's been people, or probably longer. And so they have these great track records of safety and efficacy. So I use a lot of herbs in my practice, and I love them. And I will tell you something like, I can't recommend anything specifically, but like kava kava or ashwagandha, which has become very popular, which I've been using in my whole career, they calm the nervous system down without necessarily sedating. So they let the nervous system take a big deep breath and go, wow, saber-toothed tigers are extinct. That's never going to be a problem.
Right.
And they work. They work really well. And what I'm trying to do with those is retrain or reset the nervous system so it doesn't have that default fight or flight be quite so easy or quite so fast.
Yeah, which makes so much sense. And I want to talk more about that. But before we do, you'd mentioned sort of, I'm going to just call it like the big three, but the three pillars or three factors, to sort of wellness and health: lifestyle, diet, stress, relationship with stress. And don't let me put words in your mouth, but in that order, would you say in terms of impact on, generally speaking, people's health and wellness?
That's such a good question. So I would say it varies for everyone, but I often feel like stress leads. And but if someone's stressed out, there's relationship issues, there's work issues, money issues, all the things, or just one or two of the things, and then they're eating not well.
Sitting on the couch, eating crappy food, doom
not
scrolling.
Exercising.
Right. Now the stress is compounded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then, we can eat to stabilize our nervous system. And I'd love to talk more about that because that's one of my favorite things.
Okay, can't wait.
So you can either eat to stabilize your nervous system or you can eat to make it hypervigilant, more so. So when you ask me to prioritize those, I have a really hard time doing that.
Fair, because they're connected.
Yeah, and in every single person I see, I'm looking at I'm triaging. That's a word from medicine where it's like, who's the worst case scenario? Who needs immediate treatment or they're not going to make it, compared to somebody who is less severe with their injuries or whatever. And I triage that in my patients, like always trying to go, where do we start? What do we need to look at and work with to affect kind of broad change in the body?
Right.
So I'm always doing that. Like, is it the sitting on the couch? Is it the diet? Is it the stress? And usually,
a combination, obviously. But yeah, looking at it of like what can trigger the most impact.
You got it.
What change can then start to create a positive feedback loop, or momentum and other changes, and that's what's been so wild when I think about the changes that I've made in my life and being very intentional about my health and wellness. Is it's hard to articulate this without coming across as like braggadocious or but
I like that word.
People have no idea how amazing you can feel, and then it's like then you feel even more amazing, and then you feel even better, and then you have energy to do these things. And like for me lately, I've been on an endurance running kick. I ran a 100-miler back in March, and I was just reflecting on like the mountains around here, and where it used to be a really big challenge to go and exercise there, now they're almost a playground. And it's like, holy cow, when you can start to see the momentum build, then obviously I start to want to eat healthier because I'm exercising, and now I'm sleeping more because I want to recover. And then and then also I feel like my mental health. And anyway, it all just kind of spirals. And then it's where I relate so much to the significance of that, of like finding the variable that can make the most impact, because then you got momentum, and you can ride that. Like if you can feel better for a day, the likelihood of exercising is higher, and things kind of can ebb and flow that way.
It is. I feel like with every person, there's a linchpin. There's like
a linchpin,
a way to create that process or set in motion that reset, like get to that reset. And that's my job, is to try and figure out what that is. I mean, I talk to people, my first visit is 2 hours, because I'm trying to understand everything,
all the layers,
as much as I can. And of course, in 2 hours, you can't totally understand everything. But it's that I'm looking for, is like, where do we affect change, And I mean, one way is, I think a lot of people's mental health, I think a lot of people have depression. And I actually hate that word, because automatically I haven't come up with a better word, except I'll talk about motivation or something else, trying to skirt around it, because nobody wants to be the depressed
labeled
person.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them, But if that's happening, they can't cook. They can't decide on a menu. They can't get off the couch. So I've learned to really understand that really well, because if that doesn't get addressed, it doesn't matter how brilliant my treatment plan is for them. They're going nowhere.
Yeah. Gosh, and I can now see too how rapid the opposite could be. You're feeling depressed, or you're having those bad days, and you can't cook, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm going to get fast food because you got to eat. And then, it's slippery slope. I've always known how connected they all are, but I love that concept of a linchpin, and letting it sort of be a catalyst for change.
It is something I learned over time. I've been practicing for 21 years, and there's such an art to medicine, definitely, and it is all an experiment. Everybody who comes in, they're all totally different.
Yeah.
But if I can find that piece and we can make that change, then everything can roll from there. And I love it when it's diet, like one of my favorite things is to get people's blood sugars balanced. Because without that, then they're depressed, and they're lethargic, and they're fatigued, and they don't, the brain doesn't work, the body doesn't work. And so that's easy in theory. I mean, it's easier than a lot of things. It's like, have protein for breakfast. And they're like, oh, can I have a protein powder? I want you to do meat, which, of course, with my vegans and vegetarians, we have to figure out something else.
Right.
But it's like, that is huge. I mean, it's so big. And people will be like, oh, I don't want to eat chicken for breakfast. I'm like, it's up to you. I'm not in charge of you, but here's one way you can help. And if they can shift that blood sugar issue, a lot of times they'll just take off.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, wow, I feel so much better. So, yeah.
It's a perfect segue into diet, and I'll just tee it up a little bit with some of my perspective. But I mentioned earlier, I've got 3 kids.
Yeah.
And I've been on kind of my own health kick, and it's been fascinating to see. I've very recently, we hear about processed foods and ultra processed foods, and how much sugar is in our diet, and especially in the stuff that's marketed to kids.
Yeah.
And we're a busy household, and we're doing the best we can and whatever. But it's been fascinating to see the more intentional I've been about that type of stuff. Like if we're gonna cook the eggs from our chickens this morning, or if we're gonna microwave the ultra processed thing, which, and both happen, to be very clear. I'm not anywhere near perfect.
There's no perfection.
Right. But you can just tell, I've been able to notice a difference in my kids' energy levels and their behaviors and things like that, and their relationship with sugar especially. It's just been fascinating. And I think that Well, we were talking about it off camera earlier about how disconnected so many modern humans are from our food
Right.
and our diet and what's in it and things like that. But anyway, so I just wanted to tee it up with my interest in it. I'd love to hear from you. You had mentioned sort of this concept of that our diet, I hope I get it right, that our diet can either calm our nervous system or excite it. That's going to be my layman's terms.
Yeah, that's it.
For it.
You got it.
Tell me more about that. I had no idea that our diet could impact our nervous system. So I am all ears.
It's huge because of the physiology of it all, I'm such a nerd. I love physiology. I love the sciences of medicine so much. And so I worked hard in medical school to create what I call my pictures of how everything works. And in the nervous system, you've got fight or flight on one side as one mode. And then on the other side, you've got, which is called the sympathetic nervous system. Then you've got rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is only about fight or flight. That's the only thing that works there. Blood flow to the muscles, that's it. That's all that does. And of course, there's the gray area between. But in rest and digest, we're calm, we can digest, we can absorb. The neurotransmitters that run rest and digest are serotonin and GABA and glycine, but mostly serotonin and GABA. But over here, you have adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, cortisol. So when you talk about the nervous system being affected by food, protein is probably one of my favorite positive examples, and blood sugar is huge because when your blood sugars drop, so if I had Captain Crunch for breakfast, which as a kid we did, my mom was great. She had gardens, they grew game birds, but at breakfast, I think she was tired.
Right.
And so she's like, Captain Crunch, there was even a bowl of sugar on the table. Sorry, Mom. But I was a sleepy kid. I fell asleep all the time, and it took me forever to understand, it's because my blood sugar crashed.
Oh, of course. Now, yeah.
So when your blood sugar crashes, you secrete adrenaline. Boom, you're over here. And cortisol, you're over here. And you're in that fight or flight. And so then your body's like anxiety, that whole hangry term, it all comes from that. It's the neurotransmitters that are secreted with the state of glucose availability in the bloodstream. It's huge. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you are having the typical blood sugar bouncing, having a processed high sugar food in the morning, after you've been fasting all night, your blood sugar's the lowest it's going to be in the morning, you have something like that, you go zoom, you go up high, you come down hard. And that's where people then are like, oh, I need coffee or I need this or that. And then you could just keep doing that all day. And so you're getting these shots of adrenaline, like you're supporting that fight or flight nervous system more and more and more. And then you drink coffee or you have caffeine and it's like, boom, you really trigger that and activate that. So moderating or stabilizing blood sugars changes everything in the brain, in those those neurotransmitters. It's so amazing.
And to make sure I'm understanding, high protein or potentially other things I want to learn more about, but contributes to stabilization of the blood sugar, which then stabilizes your neurotransmitter responses to that.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Got it.
So, and I think the timing of the protein is important. So I would say if somebody's like, I don't want to eat a lot of meat, I don't want to eat a lot of eggs, there are plant sources of protein too that can be helpful. But the most important thing, that old saying, like breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and it's because of that fasting period before it. And what I've experienced with my patients and myself is if you don't fix that blood sugar that's low in the morning, you set yourself up for the 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock crash.
Right.
It's just really hard to get back on track with it. Like, I'll have protein for lunch. And it's like, well, you've already gotten in that mode of nervous system, like, oh, okay, I'm not sure what to do. So
it reminds me of a it's a bit of a satire meme I saw the other day, but it was like somebody saying, I don't know why I have such bad anxiety while they're drinking a Starbucks drink for breakfast and scrolling their smartphone. It's like, well, that might contribute a little bit to, the anxious state.
Well, it is. It's like this vicious cycle of, oh, I'm tired. And that can be a lot of pieces too, of course. But I'm tired. When I'm tired, I'm craving sugar because it's going to give you a bump, and it's going to give you a bump of serotonin that doesn't last long, but it happens. And so then you do that, and then you crash, and then, you want something, you have to do your work. You have to, take care of your life, your family, whatever. And so you go, okay, I'm having coffee. And it's just like it goes around and
it's like
around
Band-Aids.
and around.
Yeah. And then you end up in that vicious cycle.
And anxiety is huge. Anxiety is, I have seen people help their anxiety by 50% or more just by eating protein in the morning.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm giving away like one of my, it's not a secret, but like one of my biggest things, it's like, oh, let's stabilize blood sugar first and then see what's left over.
Which brings up a concept I'm interested in, and I want to enter this delicately because I don't want to discredit anybody, or I never would want to, speak ill of any profession or field or anything like that. But what you had just mentioned there about your words exactly were, let's try that first. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, meaning mm-hmm. in this case, protein for breakfast as it relates to anxiety. But that idea of let's try this first, I think applies to so many ailments that you see and struggles that people are facing from your patients.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious because and maybe the best way to approach it would be, it seems to me like potentially I'll call it modern medicine or traditional medicine. Conventional, thank you.
Yeah.
The conventional medicine, again, entering this delicately and not trying to jump to conclusions, that has a tendency at least to address symptoms, and maybe that's through medication or whatever, where I just picked up a little bit from you that it's like, well, hold on, let's see the other things contributing to it first rather than just attacking the symptom. Can you walk me through, and that's what brought up this question, is I'd love to learn more just from your perspective even on the differences between naturopathic medicine and conventional medicine in layman's terms, for the people that are listening that have no idea what the differences are from your perspective.
Right. That's a great question. So, conventional medicine has and I respect all of those practitioners. I know they're doing the best they can in some really hard situations because they are governed by different constraints than I am. So for insurance is one of those, right? If somebody has a certain insurance and they're only allowed so much time with a doctor, I spend 2 hours at my first visit with a person. If I had 10 minutes, I know they see like 40, a lot of the practitioners in the conventional medicine system see 40 people a day. I wouldn't know who they were. I would know nothing about them. So the time piece is a big difference, I think. Like I'm outside of the system though, right? I'm cash pay. Insurance will not cover what I do at this point unless you're in Washington or I think Connecticut. So
there's a whole podcast about that.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a whole.
We'll save that for round 2.
So I get time with my people. I make time with my people. And am I making a fortune? I'm not. But I don't know how I could do it otherwise because as a naturopathic doctor, I don't want to just treat the symptoms. So I'm looking for the cause or causes. Mm-hmm. And that's where I want to effect change from, is uncovering those causes and then treating at that level. So that because one of the big differences too is I believe that the body can heal just about anything. I don't necessarily think that my way or the medicines I use are always the cure. I believe in the best medicine for the person with whatever's going on and what they want and believe. I'm working for my patients. It's not the other way around. So that concept of finding the cause is not easy. You know, you can do an x-ray, you can do blood work, you can do this, you can do that, but if you don't talk to people, I don't know how I would ever know all the nuances and the things that are affecting them so that I can then help them from that level. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so that's one difference, a big difference. And that is, you know, the difference between being in a system that has specific constraints, which is conventional medicine mostly, versus me, who's a one-person shop who gets to decide how much time I spend with each person. And I've tried cutting down my visits to like 90 minutes. It just doesn't work for me. It's like, no, I have a lot of questions.
Right.
So there's that piece. There's the treating the cause piece. And again, like if treating the cause was easy, I think everybody'd be doing it. And it's just not. It's complex
Yeah.
for most people. And then, you know, working with lifestyle issues is not easy. Like people, it takes a long time to change habits. And so diet interventions are really, really tricky. You know, it's like a conventional doctor saying, well, you know, quit drinking. You have fatty liver, stop drinking. Doesn't really help people very much because they're like, well, I've been drinking my whole life, adult life. So, you know, understanding like how hard it is to make changes for people. I'm so respectful. And maybe some practitioners would say I'm too easy on my patients, but I am gentle. It's like walk 10 minutes. I don't care where you walk, just get up and walk 10 minutes because of the very thing you said, like you start walking 10 minutes, you start getting inspired possibly, and then you start going, oh, I can do 15. Oh, my body's okay, I can do, you know, but I have time to coach them with that. I'm really, you know, coaching people so much more than just about anything else. I've got all the medicines and all that, but it's like the relationships. And that's another piece of naturopathic medicine is we typically form these really sweet, supportive relationships with our patients.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I you know what's going on in their lives. I understand them as well as I can, and I give them support. You know, in naturopathic medicine, we have we have a whole set of rules. There's a lot of things, but there's like the ways that we approach a case. So treat the cause is one of them. First, do no harm, of course, is one of them. There's a whole set of those that I use. Now it's just automatic because I've been doing it long enough. It's like I'm looking for all these things. I couldn't even explain to you how my process goes.
Right.
But those are some of the pieces, you know, and conventional medicine, again, like I have the highest respect for all of those people. I couldn't do what they do because I have too much curiosity and too much of a different way of approaching what I believe about healthcare and medicine and people healing. But those are some cool things. And one of my favorite things about naturopathic medicine is that understanding that the body knows what to do. Mm-hmm. And it wants to do it. Homeostasis, it wants to heal. It wants to balance things. What do you have to do to help that happen?
Yeah.
Not suppress symptoms, but actually support the body in
Heal.
this way. Yeah, to where it goes, oh, I can do that, you know, with metabolic syndrome, which is where blood sugars are off, and there's like insulin resistance happening, and that's a whole nother conversation too. But in that, you know, working with diet is the only thing that works. I mean, you could give them drugs too, and they kind of work, but you're not healing the process. And again, the body wants to heal. I've seen people heal from things they never told me in medical school that would happen, you know, like livers heal, brains heal. And I'm not saying there's not terminal issues. There are. But it's fascinating to me. It's like, I would say it's like magic, but it's just real.
Yeah. Well, I've got about 1,000 follow-up questions after that. But a couple of just thoughts. But, you know, it reminds me early in our conversation, we were talking about just how natural how good it felt, you know, to be in the mountains. Mm-hmm. And it's like this idea that if you can give yourself the chance, if you can, you know, put these things in place and set up your environment and have the whatever, but give your body a chance to do what it's meant to do. It feels right. It feels natural.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the path to that is hard for people to navigate because of modern society, habits, whatever, there's so many different variables.
Yeah.
But once you can get there, that's what I've experienced in my life for sure, is that like I feel it. There's things that are non-negotiables for me now in life. Like when I stopped drinking, I quick anecdote, and then I'm going to get back to all my questions because there's about 1,000 of them. But I sensed that there might be flirting with a problem, maybe, because I didn't have any alcohol and I felt frustration. And I remember going, that's a red flag. Mm-hmm. So I stopped. It was on my birthday. And I didn't have a timeline. I just said, I'm going to take a break from alcohol. It's now been almost 18 months, and I don't even miss it. And it's one of those where, like, once I've realized how much better I feel on the other side, and that's one example of many, I can't fathom going back. My wife gives me a hard time about how much I prioritize sleep. I'm like, I like to feel good.
Yeah.
And and so for me, this recipe is like, I need to have a good night's sleep, a protein-rich diet.
Yeah.
I need to not have alcohol. I need to exercise.
Down,
I need to spend time outdoors, and I need to spend time with people that I love.
Yeah.
And
that's a great formula.
Amongst a few other things.
I love that.
But and because I like to feel good, call me selfish, call me crazy, but when I feel good, I'm happier, I'm more productive, I'm a better father. I mean, this ripple effect just happens. Yeah. And anyway, all of that to say, I can totally see how there's this natural ability for us to heal and for us to feel good, and for these things to fall into place for people. I'm curious, one of my many questions, but do you think that generally speaking, that the use of medication is do you think people are over medicated? Generally speaking, the American population.
Drop the bomb. Yeah. So you're talking about pharmaceuticals. When you talk about medications,
yes.
Right? That's a really hard question to answer. My tendency would be to say, diplomatically, I feel like there's a different way to do it. And so the thing with a lot of the pharmaceuticals, and you can get this in natural medicines too, you could overdose on carrots. You could overdose on anything and get a side effect or get a problem. But the thing that I see a lot of is that the pharmaceuticals have side effects. I see people do fine with a lot of them. And it's different for everyone, But I feel like, I think it's a deeper issue of that's what conventional medicine does. That's the only tool that they have.
Yeah.
And if I had 10 minutes with somebody and they told me they were not able to get off the couch, not able to get out of bed, not able to eat, what's going to happen is I'm going to write them a prescription for an antidepressant. And I'm not going to have the time to go, well, have you tried eating protein? Have you tried getting therapy for the traumas? Have you tried calming the nervous system with something natural, like chamomile tea or something simple? They don't have time. And so I love our culture. I am so proud to be in this culture, and I'm so fortunate, and I know that. Like, I get that. And I think one of the big things in our culture that holds us back from our health, our success, our everything, is we are doing too much. We don't make time. It's like a quick fix culture. Because people are running fast and hard. And I get it. I totally get it. I've done it. Like when I was in medical school for 5 years, I was a wreck by the time I got out. I was 40 by the time I got out, so it wasn't, 25 or something, but I didn't have time. I was studying and I was working constantly. I was either in clinic or I was studying. So I understand it, but I feel like our culture people don't have space.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you don't have the space and conventional doctors aren't able to get into the real kind of roots of the problem, I think you're going to see over medication.
Right.
And I think, I have people coming in to the office, they're on 10, 20 meds. And it's like, and they have, are there symptoms that they have now side effects? What I do is I look at all the drugs, I go through all the side effects, and I mark the ones that could be potentially causing the problem. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question, but I feel like, you're talking about the results of a medical system, conventional medical system, that isn't able to do anything but medicate and over-medicate.
Right. With good intentions.
Yeah, it's not, a cardiologist gives 4 things to somebody who had a heart attack or who has had symptoms and they're going down that road. It's possible that could save that person's life. It's totally possible, and I think I've seen that quite a bit. And then there's the other pieces, like, so there's a lot of other ways to address it.
Right. It's fascinating. You talked about that idea of people doing too much. And I think I fall into that category for sure. And it's been a really interesting journey for me because it was actually a conversation on the podcast. I'm going to butcher it now, but it was if I'm self-confident or my self-worth. Anyway, I forget. And one of them was tied to accomplishments. The other one is just me, and learning about that. And I've had plenty of, self-work on like working through that stuff. But that idea of recovery, because you had talked about earlier, the fundamental nature of our nervous system is I forget exactly how you worded it, but basically fight or flight and then recover.
Yeah.
Fight or flight, recover. Yeah. Fight or flight, recover.
Yeah.
And then you think about how that works into this whole mess of a system we've been talking about with, all of these things. And then you throw in this idea that there's no time for recovery.
Yeah.
What a powerful moment. And so for me, it's translated into self-care and taking the time to disconnect from work, turn off my phone, early enough at night to be able to sleep well, and these things like that. But I think that that's a huge piece that more people are missing than they realize is more isn't always better. Sometimes, and for me, it took me on the verge of like breakdown to learn that I have to stop, and actually by stopping, I'll do more later, which feels so counterintuitive. Yeah, especially for a guy like me. And I enjoy the grind. Like I love, that it's dark outside and we're podcasting right now, and I've been going at it since, early this morning or whatever.
Yeah.
But that recovery piece, I think, is so overlooked sometimes where, and then you think about the idea that we're medicating, we're throwing Band-Aids at these symptoms, we're treating symptoms so we can continue go.
Right.
And we never recover.
Yeah. It's one of the biggest things I face in my patients. Like, I've got my children, I've got my marriage, I've got my profession, I'm trying to go to school to better myself. And I'm trying to exercise, and I'm trying, most of the time you can't do everything. But I do believe in the way that we find our way is by hitting our walls. So I don't criticize that
I'm
at all.
guilty of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me too. It's like, how do I know that I've gone too far is by hitting the wall, by crossing over that boundary.
Once I've gone too far.
Yes, and suffering and going, oh, wow, I exercised too hard, too late, and I can't sleep now because my cortisol's through the roof and I just can't sleep.
Right.
I had to do that myself by having that happen to me enough times where I'm like, oh, duh, okay, I need to stop this. But I feel like it's an interesting thing because in my patients on a daily basis, it's a hard issue to change. And it is, you said it perfectly, like recovery from everything, right? From overstimulus, because the nervous system doesn't like that. We're attracted to it because we get dopamine hits from it, which feels great. But the nervous system's like, I can't I can't get out of fight or flight here.
Right.
So
it's interesting. Sorry, another anecdote, but I've noticed, and it's something I'm working on. I have a problem with it, but I'm on my phone too much. I think like most people.
Right.
And I hate it. When I went on a camping trip a while back with my family, and we had no cell phone service, and it was the best 3 days of my life.
Nice.
My phone was in my backpack, and what I realized was I call them micro moments, but I had all these interactions with my children that I normally would have missed, even though I'm a present father. You know, I very much do. I'm very intentional about being a good dad, but you think that you're on it for a minute, but it's disruptive, and it was so insightful for me. In fact, I left there feeling really emotional and guilty about the micro moments that I could potentially have missed, over the last few years. Just those little, like, just those little things. But what I've noticed, speaking of the dopamine and cortisol and just the influxes of things into our system, is that when I am doom scrolling or I'm on my phone, I'm impatient with my children, and I hate it. And so it's something.
Irritable.
I'm irritable, and I've realized that So what started this was being present and having the opportunity to experience those micro moments with my kids.
Yeah.
What's kept it going was the realization that when I'm on my phone too much, I'm irritable, and I snap easier. I've got way less patience and things like that.
Interesting.
And it's got to be because of that flood of dopamine and the nervous system staying heightened. I'm doom scrolling or whatever, and my kid spills a drink. It feels way bigger than if my phone is put away, and I'm being present with my family, and my kid spills a drink.
Well, the addictions, dopamine is about addiction, and dopamine is interestingly on the fight or flight side. Even though it makes us feel it's our pleasure hormone, our pleasure neurotransmitter. But it's on the fight or flight side. So if you're stimulating dopamine production, which our brain is trained, like, oh, I got some dopamine, I want more. I'm going to remember that. Then you're going to be in fight or flight more. It's really, again, that seems counterintuitive to me too, but it's absolutely true. And so, you're irritated that somebody's messing with your fix.
Oh my gosh. Boom.
Yeah, you're like, stop. I'm here.
I'm like literally a drug addict almost, of like, I need my dopamine drip. Holy cow.
Right.
The way you just worded that, thank you for that, because that's a powerful way to look at it. And that's the thing. That's been so much of my mission behind this podcast, is like, all of us mean well.
True.
There's not a parent out there that wants to be the irritable doom scroller, and the more educated we are about the impact, and just realizing that right there, that like chemically, scientifically, I'm irritable because they're interrupting my drip.
It's it's physiological. Wow. Yeah. It's you can't help it. When you're in that state and it's got you. I mean, that's any addiction, right? How many people will ruin their lives for heroin or something, serious?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of the definition of addiction, but it's basically once it negatively impacts the components of your life,
and you can't stop.
Right,
and you can't quit it.
And if I'm irritable with my kids, that's a negative impact on something in my life.
You don't want to do that.
No.
That is not your intention. That's not what you want. But then it grabs you and you become somebody else.
You just made a difference tonight, by the way. Yes. Like, because I've been working on it, but that reframe, because it's been so fun. The more I get to talk to experts in their fields, I think I've been really fortunate in the sense that I do a lot of things intuitively. Mm-hmm. Like I sense that it's not right or a good fit or this isn't serving me well, but rarely do I know like the science behind it or, and then once I learn it, it helps so much to articulate it and to stick with these things. So anyway, even that right there was
it's so fun.
So cool.
It's so fun because when you and the other thing I'm really a believer in is like being graceful with ourselves.
Yeah.
Because the human brain is designed to find more dopamine. It probably was something that helped us survive way back when. it's different now mostly, but it's, it's an escape. It's a way to take the pressure off. And it's a way to kind of, get out of whatever. And it doesn't mean that our lives are not good. It just means sometimes we're overstimulated.
Yeah.
We're stressed out. Maybe we're hungry. Maybe we're just like, the balance is never a steady state. It's always like moving. And we're always coming in and out of it in so many different ways. So I think that being gentle with ourselves is so important, because I see guilt and shame and all those things that we all feel, and we're all going to feel, as being so destructive to our healing process. And there are some of the toughest things to overcome, like, guilt about people putting themselves first to try and get healthy and heal when their spouse does not want to change their diet, or their partner's like, if you do that, I don't know if I can do that. And saying, like raising their hand and going, yes, I'm choosing me first. The guilt about that is so big for a lot of people, and it's an obstacle.
Yeah.
And I don't have a great way to get past that except therapy.
Right.
And then again, like if you calm the nervous system, you settle some of that.
Well, and I think education could be a pathway, to solving that, because if you're educated about the impacts of putting yourself first, and how you can then better serve others, and to very simplify all of this, then I think the odds of feeling guilty about it go away.
It's a good point, yeah.
But it's still there. I mean, like my wife, she's the best, but she is raising our family. She's, helps us with our income and, working, and runs our household, and, she does all of these things. And I encourage her to exercise and, take time for herself. She actually just ran her first marathon this year. She crushed it. It's frustrating. I ran it with her, and it was my second best time ever, and it was her first marathon ever. And I'm like, gosh, dang it, she's really good at running. But, we both do, but she especially struggles with that, the mom guilt of like, I need to be 100 places at once. How in the world do I take a half hour to go get some sunshine and exercise for myself? But I think if people are educated on the idea that by doing that, you're actually better for the people that you love, and increasing the likelihood of you to, provide a income for your family, and all these things that might help with the guilt stuff.
I use the thing that they do on airplanes. They say to you with the air mask, you got to put yours on first, because if you don't do that, and that's the truth. Like if you don't help yourself first, you're not going to be able to be there for the people you love. And when you're a pillar of the family, a parent, it's like, but I mean, it's so challenging because I think we're going so fast.
Yeah.
And people we want all the good stuff. We want all of it, but I don't have an answer for that except playing around with one of my favorite things would be to have like a special trail that people can go on, and those people that are scared don't have to worry about the bears or the mountain lions or the people that might hurt them or whatever, and they could just have this nice experience in silence and in nature, because I feel like, again, like that calms us. It feels really natural. And maybe in that space, we're better equipped to go, okay, what needs to happen right now, and what's going to move us forward overall, instead of, I mean, it's a little bit of symptom, you're trying to live your life by just getting rid of the symptoms,
right,
instead of being able to have that overall view. And nobody's doing that on purpose. Again, like I don't feel any blame, and we all have those feelings, like, oh, I didn't do that well, or I want to try this, but I don't know how. And education, I think, is huge. And, and the other thing I think is huge is support.
Right.
Like I tell people all the time, you can do this, but we take one thing that you need to do, so we don't tax you and we don't make you feel bad. I want to set people up for success. I don't want them to have this huge list of things they have to do, all these pills they have to take, change your diet, get more sleep, do this and that, because it never works.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, I'm so lame, I can't do this.
I failed. Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I would, if I had your job, I would be bad at that, because I'd be like, here's here's the 100 things to start doing. So let me know how it goes next week, because I'm all like, pumped up, and you can tell I have a lot of my mind goes faster than my mouth sometimes, and I got a lot to get out there. But I'm curious actually about that. It was a question I meant to ask you. Well, for one, I can sense from you how much you genuinely care. And I think that's amazing, and that you're really impacting people, and you're making people feel better, and contributing to people living more fulfilling and rich lives, and all these great things. You had talked about that trifecta though of diet, lifestyle, and stress. Mm-hmm. Obviously, especially diet and lifestyle are tremendously difficult to change, mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. So I'm curious. Considering the difficulty of changing those things and the closeness that you have with your patients, do you sometimes feel frustrated that when lifestyle, changes are not happening or are slow to happen? I'm just curious what that feels like.
Yeah, I mean, I think I used to feel that much more early on in my career. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have all these great ideas for you. Why can't you do this? And I'd never say that, because I mean, my heart is very tender for people. Like, my first goal is not to cause hurt in any way for anyone. Certainly there are times when I misspeak or whatever, but it's like, oh, no, I'm here to support. But yeah, there's been times, and there are people who it's like, you're not doing anything. And the good thing about not having insurance cover what I do is those people don't stick around. They take what they get, and then they're just not ready. I think that readiness is a huge factor in that. And I talk about that with them. Like, what can you do? And often they don't know, but they're like, I usually when that's the case, most of the time I start out really simple anyway. It's like, let's do one thing. Let's not eliminate all these foods that are bad for you. Let's add in protein. Let's add in more fruits and vegetables. Let's put in a salad a day. So yes, the answer is I have felt that frustration. And I think as you do something longer and longer, or my experience is like, I just get more and more settled in it. And it's like, I don't know what their journey is. I'm not the one to decide what's right and wrong for them, ever. And so if they're not ready or they can't do something, I'll call it. I'll just say, so this is what I'm seeing. I'm wondering what you need. What do you need? Because I don't want to put pressure on you. I don't want to set you up to fail. Like, we're here, you're showing up. What do you need? And those conversations have been some of the best conversations I have with my patients. Like, well, I can't afford organic, or I don't like salad, or, whatever. And it's like, oh, okay. So then we narrow it down to, what can you do? And maybe you can't do anything right now, but we can talk about it and we can try and set it up. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I feel like definitely in the beginning, I could feel more of that.
I would feel frustrated. That's why I'm curious. and I can totally see though how that would evolve, and as the practice matures and, you have more experience, then, kind of like, hey, it's almost like I'm not, you've got the tools to help, but you're not responsible for, at the end of the day, every individual is responsible for their own well-being and their own health.
Right.
You're giving them the resources and the information. So I'm curious and try to answer this, because it's a little bit, I went through my kind of like punch list quickly. But if there were a, Dr. Utter's recipe for wellness, or if I'm getting into the medicine cabinet and I'm going through my recipe book, and there's my my card for my recipe for health and wellness.
Oh yeah.
What would be on it from and it's your recipe for health and wellness? What does that look like?
So there's so many pieces to that, but I think it all starts with empowerment, which I don't know exactly how to teach that. I do my best to be like, okay, let's work through the stuff. But I think empowerment is that diet, exercise, lifestyle issues, those are the foundation. But that empowerment's tricky because, again, like, how do you teach that? You show an example and you encourage people, I think, like, this is what you can do, maybe. What can you do? I'm a big believer in giving power to people. Mm-hmm. It's not about me. The visits are not about me at all. It's not my place to judge or my place to decide what should or shouldn't be. I ask. So that empowerment piece, like fostering that, supporting that, planting a little seed maybe, and then just giving, honestly, it's like the love part of it, truly. Because I love all my patients. And, conventional, they all have my cell number. They don't call me because I've trained them like this is what we do. If we're in trouble, we go to the ER, we call the paramedics or whatever. So I think that support piece is huge. And I think people can fly when you give them that.
Yeah. I love that empowerment idea. I'm going to make you finish your recipe, but I love that empowerment idea because I've said oftentimes that if people had any idea how strong they are, how capable they are, how remarkable they are, and it's things that I had to almost like fool myself into. Like I was just dumb enough to try some things and like realize that, and I want so desperately for people to feel that too, that like you are capable, you can do it, and it's within you, you know? And so I love that idea of empowerment and love. I mean, gosh, you want to talk about a healing force,
There's nothing
and
better.
Love. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of foundational. All the foundational pieces like eating good, healthy, whole foods and doing the best you can with that because there's no perfection. That's probably one of the recipes is like there is no perfection and you give yourself a break when you don't do it the way you think you should. And then I would say like sleep. Diet is huge. Exercise is huge, but people don't sleep. And probably because of a lot of things, but it's like sleep is huge. I cannot give anybody a pill or anything that can equal the power of sleep in healing. And, I didn't realize how people don't sleep till I became a doctor. Because I'd always been a good sleeper and was like, oh, I'm not, when I hit menopause, that wasn't true. And I was like, oh, this is what they're all talking about. But sleep is big.
Yeah.
And solving the sleep issue, I've found, is not always easy. And it goes back to like, the trauma and the activation of the nervous system and fight or flight and the diet. I mean, it's all there. But if people can get a lot of sleep, and I'm off, they'll be like, I get 8 hours. And I'm like, we probably need 10 right now because you're trying to heal.
Right.
Your body's in this bid to heal. Let's try more. Can you? And there's where guilt often comes in too. But we work with that. And so sleep is huge. And then I think we hit on this early on, like stepping outside, slowing down a little, trying to focus on what you can do. I don't know if I'm totally answering your question, but those are the pieces. And those are things that if I don't talk about those with people, it's almost like they don't know.
Right.
Like I'm just in the grind. I'm trying to, do everything I'm supposed to do. It's like, well, could you do this? And a lot of times they're like, no, I can't. No, I can't. I don't have 5 minutes to step outside and take a breath and look at these gorgeous mountains that surround us.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. And then they come back up and going, hey, I did it. So those are probably some of the biggest things. I mean, I believe in diet. You can change the body's, you can change genetics with diet. You can create a situation where the body is healthy and can fight off things and can keep cancers and weird stuff from happening. Sleep, exercise, and the love piece. You said it, you're like spending time with the people I love. That can't be put on the back burner.
No.
I mean, there's nothing like that either. And then spending time with the people you love outside in nature.
Yeah. After a good night's sleep, with a good meal, no devices.
I know.
It's almost like how we were meant to live.
That's the formula.
Full circle of the conversation there, and I didn't even mean to do that, but
good job. Good job.
Hey, I'm a pretty seasoned podcast host at this point. No, but seriously, and that's where I hope more people get to experience that. You know, like when you look back, when I look back on my life and I look at my happiest moments, right, my fondest memories, they are usually look like that recipe.
I know.
You know, it's the camping trips, it's the adventures, it's the time with the family, and the memories, and sitting around eating good food and being outside. I mean, there's something, and it works, and that's what I've loved so much about this conversation and your insight, and gosh, and we have to do this again, because there's about 15 deep dives I would have loved to have taken, but it's natural. It's how we're meant to be, it's how we're meant to live, and there exists a world where we can feel good. And all of that stuff coming together, and that excites the heck out of me.
Yeah, me too.
That we can share that, and that people can get a glimpse of that. It's kind of like that idea of we need one good day.
Yeah,
one
to
good
get
day.
an example to see how it can be.
And then another.
Yeah.
And then another, and then another, and then you start to decide, I'm only gonna have good days from now on.
And it's like you said, you're super protective of your sleep. And for good reason, because you know the difference.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know the difference because they felt bad for so long. But you're right. They experience one day of, oh my gosh, I didn't have to take a nap, and I wasn't in pain, and all of these things. And it makes a huge difference because you get inspired, but you also get a template.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I can feel that way.
And a little momentum.
Yeah.
And a little, all these great things. Nancy, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
For so many things. Thanks for giving me your time. I know how valuable, that is. So I really appreciate that. Thanks for sharing your expertise. But sincerely, thank you so much for the impact that you're making.
Thank you.
Because I have a very firm belief that rising water lifts all ships. And, when people are in a position like you are to, impact others, because then those others can impact others, and those others can impact others. And I am on a mission to make the world a better place.
Yay.
And to make people happier. And you're contributing to that in such a huge way. And I just want to thank you for that.
Aww.
And for spreading good and helping people feel better, and for all these great things that you do. I've got it's a tradition. I've got my Inspired by Example shirts.
Oh, nice.
I'm trying to start a movement of it, but
heck yeah, I'll wear that.
You're inspiring just by, obviously, your line of work is great and making such an impact, but just your energy and the love that you bring to the table, and your passion for it. The world needs more of that, and so thank you so much for being a force for good in the world, and for spreading the positivity and helping people feel a little bit better. I just want to thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks. It's my pleasure. I don't know how to do it any other way, and I'm lucky enough to be in a position to do that.
It's great.
With everything. So thank you. So glad we had this conversation.
Me
Super
too.
fun.
It won't be the last.
No, I don't want it to be. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Nancy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.